Hello and welcome to the Father and Son Pastime Podcast. I'm Patrick.
Oh, Kevin, how are you?
That's my dad. Dad, we're doing just a really easy review of the 2021 season today. We don't have any real notes or any kind of crazy. We're not doing a draft. We're just talking about the 2021 season. We're glad that baseball was back. Dad, for one, I didn't expect a full 162 game season after COVID, plus playoffs. I mean, it was a really return to normalcy. We saw some crazy surprises in baseball. We saw the All-Star game get moved around. That's never happened before in my recent memory.
True.
But we're just going to talk about kind of some players, some teams. We're not going to talk about any predictions yet for the offseason. That comes later. That comes in our little Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend post. But yeah, Dad, any kind of things that you want to kick off with? And we'll just kind of go back and forth.
I was very happy to have a new champion. That was very, very good. It was great to have new teams in the playoffs. I like the alignment they did with going back to the kind of original wild card. I like the new stars that emerged.
Yes.
And, there were some teams that got to the All-Star break and had to make a tough decision, made their decision, and the future will tell them if they made the right decision, selling off their stars and rebuilding the farm system. So if you really think about it, it was a year of the haves and have-nots, and then we'll go from there. But I was so happy that Atlanta won the World Championship. Great city, Freddie Freeman, been through the struggles and then stayed around and saw them grow and all that stuff. Good for him, and the excitement and just pleasure that he had in his face when they won World Series was quite refreshing. So all those go into my thought process. And the other two things, great, the Boston Red Sox made such a jump, from being a very poor team and then rebounding and getting that city enlightened. I think outside of New York, Boston may be the town that really loves baseball the most. Chicago's in there as well. And like new teams come up to the front, like the White Sox. The White Sox was really bad for a while, and they came and really kind of from start to finish were in first place. So just those kind of thoughts, and good to see people make the playoffs. Exciting playoffs. The one-game wild card between Red Sox and Yankees. My God, was that cool or what?
I love the one-game play-in playoff games, what you're going to call them as. You mentioned the White Sox, that, and my brain went to what I thought was the best game of the year with the Field of Dreams baseball game. Between the White Sox and the Yankees, you're just rooting for a good game, and boy, do they deliver. I mean, Dyersville, that was just perfect. The stadium was perfect. The corn was perfect. Everything was great about that game. I think it was one of the most watched baseball regular season games in history. I'm excited to see round 2 of it next year with the Cubs and the Reds. But what a game that was. Dad, you talked a lot about the positive teams and look at the bright stars and all that stuff. I'll talk about the teams that were really disappointments. Braves won, obviously, the NL East, and obviously Braves ended up winning the World Series. What happened to the Mets? I mean, the Mets, even before Acuna's injury, I think the Mets were favored to win the East. With the money they spent, especially
they were in first place.
Yeah, especially on Lindor as well, and just bombed.
Yeah.
I mean, completely were a disappointment. Phillies, too, they kind of just were always 500. I think the Phillies are really tired of, the Philly fans are really tired of losing season after season. I think it's one of their longest playout droughts in modern baseball history.
Yeah.
So hopefully they can turn it around in the offseason. We'll talk Cubs and Nats, talking about completely selling your teams at the last second.
Yeah.
I think they made some really good trades. Those trades aren't going to pay off immediately, so if you're a Cubs fan or Nationals fan, you're not coming back to the playoffs next year. But that's okay. That's part of how baseball works. I know if you're a Red Sox or a Yankees or maybe a Dodgers fan, it maybe never seems that way. Eventually, teams have to rebuild and people age out, and that's just how contracts in baseball works.
Yes.
But I know what you're talking about with the Nats and the Cubs specifically being those big sellers at the deadline. Really entertaining trade deadline in July as well.
All within 2 weeks. From decision-making to action.
Yeah, and maybe it's because we didn't have it in 2020, but really enjoying that trade deadline. I just feel it was more active than any year I can remember. We did our little predictions midway
30
through.
trades in one day, something like that.
It was nuts. It's you just want to take your days off work just to follow those transactions. So if you do that, just sound off below, and we'll write you a letter. You're watching the Father and Son Pastime podcast. Here's your excuse from work. But yeah, it was a really great season. The Angels, when you had Ohtani and not Trout. I would love for the Angels to get it together where both those people can be at the same team at the same time. Clear MVP, obviously, in Ohtani. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. lighting up. He's only 22 years old. There's a ton of youth coming up in baseball that's just so exciting to watch. One of our future drafts, probably sometime in December, Dad, will be a 25 under 25 roster, where we're going to draft a full roster of 25 players, all age 25 or less, because that's how many talented baseball players are young right now. If you're a kid watching baseball or watching this podcast, the future's bright for you. You'll have people for the next 2 decades that you can support and follow. So that's really exciting about baseball too.
Yeah, you can see the old timers are starting to go out, and then the new ones are coming up, and they play exciting baseball. They can hit and run and throw, and you're right. So the future is very bright for baseball. I think when they did the Yankees Red Sox playoff game, they got one of the best ratings in the last 10 years of baseball. 2 major cities, rivalry, and all that good stuff. But people are watching baseball again.
Absolutely. So, baseball's great.
Yeah.
Baseball is fun. Brett Phillips. Wish we saw more of him in the playoffs. But we saw Randy Rosarina steal home plate.
Yes.
I mean, steal home base.
Yeah. And that was pretty cool. He set that up really well.
He did. And that's just one of the most exciting things in baseball. Hitting for the cycle, sure, inside the park home run, but stealing home, just so exciting. I absolutely love that. Obviously he was a Rookie of the Year, which is weird because he's played for like multiple seasons a little bit for the past couple of years. But what an exciting player he is. So the future's bright with him and Wander Franco down in Tampa.
11 years.
Hopefully they can build a franchise around him, or both players really.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's just a fun sport to watch right now. The Orioles continue to suck. Not much has changed there. They'll be 5th place again in the East.
They're thinking about trading their best players.
Yeah, we'll talk more about speculation in a future podcast. But if you're a Baltimore fan, it's hard to go to Camden to watch a pretty much guaranteed loss or losing series. I think they won 2 series all year at home. Something like that.
They swept one.
They swept the Red Sox, and I think they won against the Yankees. But that was maybe it for winning a series at home. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they just lost a ton of games. And it's tough just to be a fan. It's tough to be a fan if you're Toronto or Seattle when you were 1 game away from the playoffs. So look for those teams to really make a difference in the offseason to try to make a run at the postseason next year.
Yeah, both have active general managers. So
yeah.
And kudos to the Atlanta general manager who made those trades at the deadline to rebuild his outfield. He went to work. He knew what he had to do to make that team competitive. And they were like a game below 500, like getting into the fall. And then had a solid September and all that stuff. But think about those trades he made at the last week to say, hey, I'm still going to be competitive. He could have cashed in his chips.
Yeah.
But he said, no, let me go at it. So good for him. I hope he's GM of the year.
And I know we have an East Coast bias here. We are in Maryland. We don't talk about the West as much as we probably should. But talking about the San Francisco Giants just being the best team in baseball, I know they didn't win it all, but record-wise they were. Just a fantastic baseball team, just like the Red Sox. No one saw them coming. Shout out to Gabe Kapler, easiest manager of the year award I think ever given. Totally turned it around. The Phillies gave up on him too soon. And the Padres, again, staying in the West, Padres were such a letdown. They finished below 500, had the largest payroll, I think, in franchise history, had the pieces, just didn't win. They didn't put it together.
The one word describes both teams' chemistry. I think they had great chemistry with the Giants. They didn't have great chemistry with the Padres.
Yeah.
So that could be a big part of what happened with those teams. And the Padres, once it started to crumble, boy, the finger pointing got started. So
Dodgers fans did not get a repeat championship, so I know they're still hungry. Houston got to the World Series again, 3rd time in 5 years. Say what you will about Houston, they're a dynasty right now. Maybe the dynasty's over.
Talented team.
Because Correa's leaving, and I'm sure Greinke's gone because they're going to keep Verlander. But I mean, for 5 years, they were the team to beat. If you wanted to win the World Series, whether that's the American League coming over them like Boston in 2018, or a National League team beating them like the Braves or like the Nationals, both NL East teams, by the way, you had to overcome the Astros. So maybe they're still that big bad wolf. I'm sure they're going to be active in the postseason. In the offseason. They do have a lot of holes to fill. We'll see what happens. But I don't know if it's great to be a Houston Astros fan because of all the consistent, playoff runs, but there's disappointment because they've only had one ring, and that's the one that's in obviously most question of all those 5 years.
They were in control of their destiny, and this didn't happen. But good for Atlanta. I mean, that was a fun final game.
Yeah. Shout out to Atlanta, obviously, a great team. Myself, you look back on future podcasts, I called the Braves winning when they had Acuna, and as soon as Acuna got injured, I was full out on the Braves, as I think most of America was, as were the writers. So shout out if you're a true blue Atlanta Braves fan. Great on you for not giving up on your team. You turned it around, made what looked like simple, small additions at the deadline with Duvall and Rosario and Soler. Turned out to just be Jock Peterson, Mr. Pearls. Turned out to be just phenomenal additions. So again, great GM. That could be the GM of the year right there.
And he didn't give up a whole lot for those players, by the way.
He gave up Pablo Sandoval and then got immediately cut by the Indians, if you recall that for Rosario.
That was a salary dump.
It was. Yeah, it totally was.
Didn't give up much for Jock. Gave up like a single A first baseman.
Yeah.
So good.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they gave up because they won a championship, and I think Braves fans would agree with that. Yeah. We got a championship out of it.
But having the speed and the confidence that he was doing the right thing, good for him.
Yeah, it worked. Dad, anything else to add before we kind of wrap this up? It's just been fun to talk about baseball again.
It is. I just think that it's fun to get new blood into the playoffs, see some teams make a resurgence. The Giants were a great team to study because they led start to finish out of a really tough division. And, to win 103 games, whatever it was, in that division, they beat the Rockies and Diamondbacks, but they had to get their fair share out of the Dodgers and Padres. Mm-hmm. And the Dodgers were, a game behind? They won 102 games? Think about that. In Division 2, 100 win teams, same division.
And neither won the World Series.
Very hard to do. So that was a cool thing in my opinion. And then just, like you mentioned before, the teams that said, you know what, let's cash in their chips and let's start from scratch and go from there. But those are my takeaways. Exciting year. I watched a lot of playoffs and World Series. 4-hour games, by the way. But you're 12:30 and you're going to bed watching World Series.
Worth every minute.
Yep.
We hope you enjoyed this recap. Somehow, if you didn't, your team to get mentioned, your player to get mentioned, we're talking about 162 games plus playoffs in about 12 minutes. So it's a challenge. But be on the lookout for our off-season predictions. We do an off-season outlook of each division. That's coming soon. As well as like top 50 free agents. If you know MLB trade rumors, we use them. And then we usually add a little bit of our own as well. So that'll be coming out soon as well. It's going to be an active offseason. We'll see what happens with the CBA. We'll see what happens with a bunch of things in baseball. We want it to be back. Players want it to be back. Owners want baseball back. So I'm confident something can be reached.
I agree. I think who's going to give in first, but I think the big ones are arbitration, DH, years of service. Those are the biggies. Some of those are hard for the owners to give in, but you can't send a kid to a minors for 6 weeks, take a year away, and then control them for a year. That's one of the things the Player Association will say, hey, that's got to change. Chris Bryant. I mean, just go down the list. People got really messed up for that added year. Just for a little loophole in the contract.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
So, I think, and the DH in National League should be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I welcome it. I'm fine with more hitting. Whatever you think about baseball being pure and the league should be different and have different rules, I understand, but baseball evolves, and at the end of the day, whatever it takes to get baseball in the field. We took 60 games last year because we missed it so much. Sure, here's a pitch clock, here's this thing, or whatever. Whatever has to be agreed upon to get baseball back is fine by me.
Oh, I agree. Hopefully cooler heads prevail.
Enjoy this offseason. Enjoy tons of podcasts coming out for us. So please, again, give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram or on Twitter at Pastime Podcast _. And we are the Father and Son Pastime Podcast on Facebook. Dad, anything else?
Have a great offseason.
Thank you. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Enjoy your Christmas as well. And tune in for more episodes.